I also serve as chair of National Initiatives and Development for the NAACP National Youth Works Committee. We say the names of Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, Drayshawn Reed, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rayshon Brooks, Anthony Chula Vega Cruz, and the countless others that have died at the hands of excessive force. We scream Black Lives Matter and recognize that the recent tragedies that have been brought to light are not isolated incidents. Our communities are angry and saddened, and rightly so. However, we must be strategic and measured as we are continuing to dismantle these systems of oppression. How we truly become the land of the free depends largely on what happens next. We're glad to be joined tonight by three activists with unique stories who can help us reimagine our realities and shape our futures. Introducing our first activist, entering the force more than 12 years ago, Lieutenant Edwin Raymond sought to change the New York Police Department from within. Being a subject in an Emmy award-winning documentary, Crime and Punishment, which is available for free on YouTube, Edwin helped reveal the NYPD's existing quota system and how police officers are retaliated against for not meeting them. Lieutenant Raymond has exercised activism while remaining an active NYPD lieutenant and is now a candidate for New York City Council's 40th District. Jada Hampton is a woman who leads, a recent graduate from the University of Kentucky. She is a Chicago, Illinois native and a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Jada currently serves as the president of the Kentucky State Conference Youth and College Division for NAACP. Lastly, we have DeAngelique Jackson, who currently serves as the president of the Fresno State Chapter, the Youth and College third vice president of the California-Hawaii State Conference, and a national civic engagement trainer for Youth and College Division of the NAACP. She has dedicated her free time serving her local, statewide, and national community. Ms. Jackson was most recently the lead organizer of the hashtag We Can't Breed protest in Fresno, California, which has been the city's largest peaceful demonstration, yet garnering over 3,500 attendees. She continues to push for change and currently serves as the youngest commissioner for the City of Fresno's Commission on Police Reform and as chair for their Community Input Subcommittee. Thank you once again for joining us tonight. Tonight we'll be taking questions from the audience, and you can type them into the chat on the Zoom, and we'll also be streaming live on the Youth and College YouTube page. Our director, Director Lofton, will be screening questions for the end. I will ask one question per panelist, and then we'll have an open dialogue. So let's get started. Everyone seems to have a different idea and stance of what defunding, abolishing, and reforming the police looks like. Define which idea you align with most and where you stand. Let's start with Edwin. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Let me see if I can mute you. There you go.
First and foremost, thanks for having this this important meeting. Obviously, this is the time in the nation now where it's the #1 subject. But as you know, as you mentioned, I've been going hard about the subject for over 10 years, since I started my career in the NYPD. Of the things you mentioned, what I align myself with the most is defunding. There's a lot of situations that police officers respond to where law enforcement is not the best option. You know, emotionally disturbed persons is a good example, but there are many other examples where cops are called, but we really shouldn't be really on the scene at all, especially the first people on the scene. And that's where I think funds should be redirected towards agencies that already do that work. You know, we can give them more resources and more personnel to do the work, or we can create agencies where the service doesn't already exist. The thing is, police officers are already rolling around, you understand? So it's a lot easier to just assign something to a cop because they're already rolling around. Perfect example, whenever a job of a fire comes over my radio, maybe 90% of the time, I get there before the firefighters. Why? Because I'm already rolling around. Whereas the firefighters, they have to get their gear on, they have to get ready, get into the truck, etc. Cops are already there, but we have to change that system. Until we can improve the system to where police presence isn't going to be problematic or triggering to many people, we have to, the things where law enforcement is not absolutely needed, we have to create other entities that can respond.
Thank you for that. I think even talking about how redirecting the funds, we'll take a deeper dive on what those funds and the allocations actually look like, seeing that the New York Police Department is one of the largest police departments that we have in our country. Where would that funding go? So we'll come back to that question, and I'll take a stab at D'Angelique.
So for me, I definitely am on the side of defunding and looking towards abolishment. I think though it's important to start with defunding. And for me, when I talk about defunding, I absolutely agree with Mr. Raymond. I think that there are so many services that we currently ask of our police departments that really they shouldn't cover. For example, mental health servicing, like how he brought up in the city of Fresno. We recently just pushed hard and finally got them to disband their graffiti task force and their homeless task force, as well as their recycling task force, all meant to, in my opinion, terrorize citizens that for things that they really have no control over, situations they have no control over, where instead we could put those resources into the parks department within our city and into the behavioral health department at a county level. So I think for me, when I say defunding, it's important to know that defunding is at its base reallocation of funding. So taking money slowly out of the police department's budget and putting it back into those resources of the city. If we were just to completely take it away like in a second's notice, then we do see like what we saw in the city of Fresno. The second we got rid of the homeless task force, now nobody was there for the homeless. So it's like we have to be able to do both. We have to slowly be able to take away and at the same time put money back into the different entities that exist in the city that are meant to help. So I think that we're putting way too much stress on our officers. I think that we're giving them way too much power and freedom as well. And in order to fix that, we have to start looking at the services that were actually meant to service and uplift people instead of looking to fight crime.
Thank you, Dee. I think you really touched a good point as well, where you're talking about holding police accountable. So Jada, you know stuff about this as well. So let's turn it over to you and figure out what your stance is on defunding, abolishing, and reforming. Yeah, I'm mute.
Yes, actually, being an inmate for over 17 hours, I saw how the police actually used their funds and what their funding was going to, like wasting paper when our own school systems don't even have enough paper. So actually redirecting those funds and putting them back into the community and help building up the community. Like Ms. Jackson said, instead of just pulling away, but slowly taking away, is definitely key.
So it sounds like all you guys are in agreement that defunding the police is the way that you guys want to go. So let's move on into the second question, and this is actually directed to Edwin. According to a study from the University of Michigan, Rutgers University, and Washington University, for young men of color in the United States, police use of force is amongst the 6th leading cause of death. Edwin, how do you get involved in this work?
I mean, one of the reasons I joined the police department was because of my own interactions with cops when I became a teenager. Grew up in the hood, grew up in a rough environment, but I wasn't involved in those activities. So to me, it was puzzling at first at 15 years old, 16 years old, while I was getting thrown on the wall, just like someone who was involved. I was wondering, what is it that they see that makes them think that I'm someone that should be thrown on the wall? And I realized it was pretty obvious. What we had in common was our ethnicity, those who were involved in those things, and they couldn't tell the difference. So that's part, most people that would deter them from becoming a police officer, but it made me more curious to go into the field to see what can be done about it. And that's when, immediately after the police academy, I learned about the enforcement quotas. And in Black and Brown, Black and Hispanic communities to be exact, officers have quotas. The New York City Police Department, other police departments, they continue to deny this because it's illegal, but this is how they operate. There's quotas, and it was a trifecta. The quotas were arrests, a certain amount of arrests, tickets, and stop and frisk that officers working in Black and Hispanic communities had to meet every month. And it bothered me because, and then I started replaying a lot of encounters I had with cops, and I started realizing the reason that they went so hard was to make those numbers. You understand? So it didn't even matter where the cop personally felt, how the cop personally felt about Black or brown people. It didn't even matter if the cop was Black or brown themselves. As long as they simply did what was asked of them, they were basically contributing to a racist system because of the inherent racism in that policy. So that's when I said, I'm not doing this. And from not going along with it, I started to face retaliation. I ended up passing my promotional exam. They did everything to keep me from getting promoted to sergeant. I got promoted because of activism and just I became a whistleblower. Then I passed the lieutenant's exam, and they did 10 times more to prevent me from getting promoted to lieutenant. Thankfully, I was able to persevere through that. But ultimately, what got me involved in the work was first my own experiences, and then seeing whether or not I can do something about it.
And how has that continued to show up in the work? So I know from looking at your Instagram, I definitely was snooping before we had this panel discussion. I see that you're very active in the community. So I want to know, how does that show up? Because I know sometimes, we have this whole idea of good cops and bad cops, and like who we root for. And a lot of times with this we have mismessaging sometimes within the communities that we're talking about with the recent rise and uprising of protests that we have that have not died down. I kind of want to see what your experience is, and seeing that you do have a pulse to the community. How's that show up, and where do you, I guess, lend your ear of support during that time period?
I mean, thankfully, many, in part due to the film Crime and Punishment, people in the community, they know who I am. They know they treat me very exceptionally, because they know that I'm here for them. Basically, what policing is supposed to, what policing is supposed to represent on paper, they know that I truly adhere to that. So my experience has been very different from others. For the most part, again, because people know who I am, I don't. It's not too rough for me out there. I mean, I support the people. I support the change. This is the reason why I went into the field. You have to remember the firearm and all of the powers that police officers have. This is not really their power. This is power from the people. The people in the social contract. The people give, society. They give the government that power so the government can protect society overall. These are all the ideal principles that make policing possible. But sadly, when it comes to our community, that's just not how it is. We have a very different experience. Many like to reference, and sometimes myself, the origins of policing in America. Not the beautiful words of Locke and Holmes and Hobbes, sorry, but instead slave patrol.
Yep.
When we think of those origins, we start to say to ourselves, well, it makes sense why we're being treated this way. So again, by definition of what policing is supposed to entail, public service, I'm here for the people. Like technically, that's what all police officers are supposed to be doing. But my support goes to the people.
So you're aligning yourself with missions and not necessarily the system itself. So I appreciate that. Question number 4 goes to Jada. All lives matter can't matter until Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter can't matter until all Black Lives matter. It's been 140 days since the murder of Breonna Taylor. As a member of Louisville 87, Jada, you were recently arrested with 86 other people in Kentucky. Why is it necessary for the NAACP to stand up on these issues?
Ooh, yes, first, shout out to my Louisville 87 family. But like our great founder once said, Ida B. Wells, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And in the case of Breonna Taylor, Kentucky knows that in order to give Breonna the justice that she truly deserves, is to right their wrongs. They must turn the light of truth upon their own flawed system. The same system that would rather lock up protesters instead of the actual murderers. And our job as the NAACP is to correct that very system that failed Breonna Taylor the moment that they put her name on that arrest warrant, on the search warrant, excuse me. And so we must hold our elected officials accountable both on a local and state level, so that we never have to deal with this type of situation ever again. Also, while doing that, we must continue to apply pressure and then also change the laws along the way. And so I just ask that everyone keep demanding justice because it's working. We're starting to see some progress in Kentucky. We finally got body cams because they did not have those when they went into Breonna Taylor's home. We finally are now getting no-knock warrants banned in Louisville. And so hopefully we can make this a statewide thing. And so it's our job as leaders to keep fighting.
So as president, what's your vision for Kentucky NAACP movement? I know we have 2-year terms, and ultimately, like, sometimes situations like this happen, right? So we have to pivot and adjust accordingly. What's your ultimate goal?
My ultimate goal is to fix all flaws within the system. So change any law that could prevent situations like this from ever happening again. And then also mobilizing more voters in Kentucky, educating the youth, building up future leaders as well.
Thanks, Jay. D, it's your turn. So in the words of Rihanna, so when we're marching and protesting and posting about the Michael Brown Jr.'s and the Atiana Jeffersons of the world, tell your friends to pull up. D'Angelique, you are a perfect example of creating tangible strategies for long-term change. Oftentimes, you see after protests, there are limited accountability. How do you strategically organize your protest of 3,500 people to hold law enforcement in Fresno accountable, and what are a few changes and improvements that have happened so far?
Yeah, so for me, when it came to looking at this protest that we organized, I was one of like 6 main organizers that really did this, and it mainly came underneath our unit. And as a lead organizer, I really just wanted to push a message of peace and unity. My intention with our protest and what we did was to really show the Central Valley and to show like California that Black people, we are not demons, you know, like we're not inhumane, like we have feelings, like the way that police officers attack us is real. Like there's a lot of community members who do not know what it is we as Black people experience and you know, call it blissful ignorance. Like with what Mr. Raymond brought up about the origin of our policing here in America. Like I'm a criminology minor for my school, and I can tell you, they don't even tell you about slave patrol. What they tell you about is Boston and the model that they established back in the 70s or the 80s. So there's a lot of misinformation running around, and our goal was really to show like, one, here are all of the statistics. We looked at every single faction and where Black people are disenfranchised in this area. But we also highlighted individual and personalized stories that people had with police brutality. And I think really one of the things that helped us to get such a large turnout is we planned our protest in less than 48 hours. And it happened like, I want to say like 2 or 3 days after the murder of George Floyd. And my friends and I, we were actually mourning, like we were in mourning. And when we went on social media, we started seeing so many posts about local protests happening over the weekend for Black Lives Matter and in honor of George Floyd, but we didn't know any Black people that were doing it. Like the Black population in Fresno is not big. We make up like 5% of the pop, so it's not a lot. So we got into every group chat that we could of organizers, and we said, listen, like you can't say Black Lives Matter and not include Black people in the process of, you know, planning these protests or pushing them out. So we let them know like, this is something we're doing. And if you truly are an ally, then you will come and stand with us. I think one thing that also really pushed me to be hard on the fact that it was going to be peaceful is the day before our protest, I actually went to the protest in San Jose that started off their riots. And I went because, you know, like I wanted to take notes as an organizer and see what it is I could see in their protests and how we could implement it in ours. And when I got there, I was shocked to find out that I was probably one of the oldest people there, and I'm 22. So it was really high schoolers. Like I was talking to somebody who said that he brought his little sister out there because his mom wouldn't let him leave the house without her. So like, yeah, it's insane. Like trying to explain to them before they went in the street and before they went on the highway, like by making these options, by blocking the highway and blocking the streets, you're going to invite these officers, making them aware. And when we got to the front lines, I'm trying to talk to the sergeants and explaining to them, like, these are kids. And looking behind me and seeing that it was our non-Black allies that were actually the ones starting to attack the police officers, throwing frozen water bottles and things like that. My friend dropped her, can you guys still hear me? My friend dropped her sign next to her, and a police officer took that as a threat on the front line and immediately started attacking her. And that's what jumped off the riots. Like, so for me, like looking to my right and seeing like, or to my left and seeing a young woman who literally was just telling me, who literally was just telling me about her, this is the worst time for this to happen, who literally was just telling me about her, her schooling. She was 15. I saw her get hit with a can of tear gas, and it was just all up on her. So it's like, I took that with a vengeance, you know? And it was like going back to my city, one of the very first things I said is, if you're an ally, you will recognize that if Black people aren't moving, you shouldn't be moving. And number two, understand that there are babies out here. Like you could go to Fresno State's NAACP, our social media, and you could see the video, like we had so many people bring out their kids and letting them know, like on top of that, downtown Fresno, the area we did the protest, this is where Black people and people of color stay. This is where we are segregated to. So you're not going to come into an area that's meant for us and destroy it in our name. That's just not things that are going to happen. So I think it was just really the honesty. We also brought up Black National Anthem. We did Assata Shakur's chant. So we just tried to make it as cultural as possible. I was being told that in the very back of our procession, at the end of those 3,500 people, they were treating it like it was kind of like a carnival or something of the extent, like it was just really a peaceful air of people really just wanting to come together. So from that protest, like it's really just about doing everything in peace and everything in kindness. We had a list of over 25 demands. And so far we've been able to see about 10 of them implemented. We were able to get 3 of the 8 can't wait implemented in our area. So we got a ban on the use of a chokehold. That was taken away. We also we have it now to where they are required to fire a warning shot before just firing immediately. And we also got it to where the duty to intervene is also being taken into account. We got them to the city of Fresno, we got them to allow the lateral hire incentive with the Fresno Police Officer Association, their union, to expire. Lateral hire incentive is what allows an officer in your area who is like, getting marks on his record. This is what it's kind of used for internally in our area, at least. Like if an officer has a bad record, then what they'll do is shoulder tap him and send him to a different precinct or send him to a different department. So that way that officer is never taken out of the system, but is still allowed to operate. So we got that. Like I said earlier, we were able to get the homeless task force disbanded, the recycling task force disbanded, and the graffiti task force disbanded. We also have our commission to reform the police department, as well as like so many other things. We were able to secure almost $30 million in COVID relief funding for the residents of Southwest Fresno. And that's hopefully going to go to the Black families. We've been able, like, there's just so much that's coming out of it. And it's really just about being transparent and letting them know, like, we're here because like we want to be seen as people, like we want the same opportunities that everybody else has. We're not asking for more, we're not asking for less. So with that, I digress, but there's so much that's come from out of this. It's a beautiful experience, but yeah.
Oh, I appreciate you, because I think sometimes a lot of people feel as if young people cannot be a part of this. And the fact that you even said that high school students were on the front lines marching with their little sisters, bringing them out from because they couldn't go out. And that also speaks to a system that we live in as well, where older siblings serve as sometimes the caregiver to their kids, to their siblings. But I want you to touch on do a little deeper dive on organizing and how you organize a protest, because I've seen a lot of protests that have been unorganized. I know, Jada, we were on a panel last week and we kind of spoke about that, where sometimes you show up to protesting and their messaging is mixed messaging. But I also want to hear from Edwin to hear what are some strategies that we could also utilize to ensure that we're safe.
Yeah. So for me, I would say there was probably like 3 main things that I did. One, I let them know we were going to run it exactly like how an organization was ran. Like I said, there was like 6 of us who were like all a part of it. And I said, one person needs to be the one that gets all of the information, that everything is filtered through. So we established a head and we went through it that way. The second thing I did was reach out to as many community members as I could find to secure like just resources. So for example, like we didn't want the city to really be involved in any part of the process. So we reached out to our local Black churches and we asked if the Black men there would be willing to serve as our security, as our community, service or like crowd control. So we got that. We also made sure that we had we got people who volunteered their time as as paramedics, as doctors, nurses came out. We had doulas coming out just to be out there to provide support. We also reached out to legal aid, and we had the National Lawyers Guild come out, and we made sure everybody had a signifying color. So like our community crowd control was in green, or was in yellow. Our National Lawyers Guild members, they were in green, and our health response team was in red. We also set it up to where like we had like lead security, we had walkie-talkies, we had microphones. Like we made it to where like it was ran exactly like how an event was. I had a checklist of things that I wanted to go through, and I would say like the thing that also helped us out the most was just partnering with other like Black lead organizers in the area to, like I said, spread the word. So We have a local DJ K Rich, who really just pushed out through all of his different local news stations what was going on. So in terms of the flow of the event, it was really just like I came through, I had a bunch of people reach out to me and say that they wanted to speak. And I set it up to where I had 4 different slots at our 2 different locations. And I said, listen, whoever's going to come up to me first and say, hey, am I still able to speak? Like, I really want to share my message. I put them in order that way. So I really allowed for this event to be as organic as possible. And I only put in the parameters to make sure that it flowed well, if that makes sense. And I hope I'm getting at your question as to like how we really went about the organizing of it. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. I don't know if I really hit it that way.
No, you're good. I want to kind of touch on Jada, because I know that they had legal observers, and you guys pretty much went to the protest with the intentions of probably getting arrested, and you did. So what is the purpose, and how do you guys go about doing it, and how do you make effective change?
So we had a group of legal observers, some included pro bono, just regulars, protesters that did not want to get arrested, and then also a lawyer. And so what they'll come and do, also, how could I forget? Ahmaud Arbery's mother was also a legal observer. And so, yeah, that was amazing to see her still out there in the field doing the work. But what they do is they document and record everything. They'll let protesters know when they're in the wrong, and they'll also let police know that we are not in the wrong whenever we're protesting on what side of the street to walk down, occupying the highway, because we did have to march all the way up to the house. So things like that, they were just there to record and write everything that happened, every interaction. So when our case does come back up, we can show that we did have this, we followed proper protocols, and that our charges are outrageous. So yeah.
And your charge was dropped, right? Well, how many charges do you have?
I have 3 charges. One was a felony that got dropped, which was intimidating a participant in the legal process, disorderly conduct in a 3rd degree, and trespassing in the 2nd degree.
Wow. Was it worth it?
Yeah, and I'll do it again.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. So I guess that's a good segue into our protest effective. D'Angelo, you kind of went into, the eight
can't wait.
Yep. So this is 25 demands that you have, but also 3 of the 8 can't wait demands that you were able to have passed and actually implemented in the city of Fresno. So our protest effective?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I could make like a quick comment, like we got a lot of people coming to us and saying like, oh, you guys did it the right way. You're the good ones because your protest was peaceful. Like ours was the largest, like most peaceful protest Fresno's ever seen. And it's like, that's something I personally have an issue with, because it's like, just because ours was peaceful doesn't mean that those that, did have to turn like, not necessarily violent, but did have to like go into the rioting in order to get their city's attention. They're not wrong for that, in my opinion, my personal opinion. Like, so the way that I described it to our city officials, even at our protest, I let them know, like, look, we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Minneapolis and throughout the country who unfortunately have had to turn to rioting, because at the end of the day, Minneapolis, as a prime example, FBI had been in contact with them for the last 2 years, telling them that their relations between the police department and their city was way too polarized and they needed to implement action. They didn't do anything. George Floyd had a knee in his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and they didn't do anything, right? They went to the streets, the citizens went to the streets, peacefully protested, and they didn't do anything. It wasn't until that Target was looted that the city said, okay, maybe we should talk about defunding our police department. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's letting them know, like, Fresno, California, for example, we are very, very polarized. We are the Red Sea in this blue state that you guys like to call California. Like Trump's 3 biggest donors came from the Central Valley. So we got that here. So it's explaining to them, like, right now, Fresno, California, we are at our boiling point. Minneapolis boiled over. And if you continue not to listen to these citizens, there will be nothing that we can do as organizers to stop this energy from boiling over. So peaceful protests work, protests in general work. It's about getting out there, using your voice and spreading a message, but also understanding that after the protesting comes the work. You know what I mean? Like the real, like behind closed doors, nitty gritty, like where you actually have to do the policy development, which is what I'm really, really getting into right now. So yeah, with that, I digress, but get out there any way you can, in my opinion.
No, you're good. I think that goes into a good civic engagement strategy. So Edwin, you're running for office, and this is a C3 event, so there aren't any endorsements. But through all the pushback, why is it so important that people run for office?
it's important that the right people run for office, because people run for office all the time and have their own agendas. You know, once we get people with integrity, people who are truly about the people in what a true democracy is supposed to represent, we can get some good work done. You know, we get people who can write important legislation, sponsor important legislation, and people who vote on important legislation. So it's crucial that people are registered to vote so they can be civically engaged, and the right people run, and the right people are voted for. And I truly believe I'm one of those people. This is a calling. People have been asking me to do this for about 4 years, for over 4 years now. And I realized that with all that I've been able to accomplish for policing in New York, as a whistleblower, as a defendant in an active federal lawsuit, you know, you have to wonder, with that same integrity, that same rigor, what will I be able to do from City Hall? So that's the objective, to get to City Hall and apply the same energy to housing, education, healthcare, homelessness, and, you know, all these other things that are affecting our community.
I think that's important too. When we think about even the NAACP in structure, we were founded in 1909, and our Youth and College Division was formally founded in 1936. So thinking about reaching back and going for the young people and the youth and getting them involved. I want you to kind of do a deeper dive into what the documentary is about and what you expect people to learn about the film. So we have a clear understanding after we watch this film, hopefully after the conclusion of this panel discussion, what you anticipate for us to learn from it.
So the film Crime and Punishment, basically a documentary filmmaker, he recorded over 4 years of this growing movement of officers who are able to see what the issues are. And rather than just see it and go along with it, you know, we decided to try to do something about it. At first it starts with 2 officers, then grows to 3, and then it becomes 12. We decided not only to expose the quota system and other issues in the New York City Police Department, but also we got together and we're suing. You know, we have a federal lawsuit, the first of its kind, where we're suing on behalf of the people. So most lawsuits are designed, civil suits, you sue based on what's occurred to you personally. That's part of our complaint, but the bulk of the complaint, we're suing on behalf of the people, of what the department does to the people. Why this is important is because NYPD is the cream of the crop. That's the police department that others look towards. A lot of times when they're choosing new leadership, they'll hire retired NYPD chiefs. They'll send representatives to learn the system here in New York and bring it back to other places. Ferguson was a good example of that, Baltimore, and so many other police departments who have mimicked this system called CompStat, broken windows policing, enforcement quotas, you name it. So the film it basically shows the journey that we go through as police officers in trying to fight this fight. What people are going to learn about the film is that this perspective exists. Because what you see is it's binary. You're either an activist who wants policing to be done away with, or you're a stubborn law enforcement official who can't see anything wrong with the issue. This perspective, officers who understand and see that there's something wrong with the system and at the same time want better policing, there's really nothing else that focuses on that perspective. So that's one of the things that you get from the film.
How hard was it for you to make that decision to sue the city?
It's a real question.
It is.
Yeah, believe it or not,
That's your bread and butter. Like, if you think about, like, a lot of people, your job is your sole income, and you literally just sold your job. So,
especially given, you know, like my life story is nothing simple. You know what I mean? I have the humblest beginning you could think of. You know, immigrant parents. My mother died when I was a baby. My father wasn't working since I was 6. Just struggle. It's all you know, struggle. And once you, like, as a young Black, you know, boy at the age of 12, some of the wrong things are breathing down your neck. You know, you're literally one decision away every day from throwing your life away with everything that's in front of you. So to make the right decision, make it into a career in law enforcement at 22 years old, and then, you know, put it all on the line, it's not an easy decision, which is why I understand why others don't do it. But I reached a point about 5 years ago where I didn't care anymore. I didn't care what happened to me. I was literally ready to risk it all for everybody here. for everyone, for all of us. I realized that this is my calling. I thought I was just going to blow the whistle and whatever happened would happen. I had no idea I would even be alive, let alone, land on my feet and get promoted. So it actually wasn't a difficult decision once I reached that level of frustration where I was ready to make any sacrifice I had to, I was at peace with. So it really wasn't a difficult decision, but it was difficult reaching that point where I was ready to risk it all.
And I think a lot of times our anger in terms of protesting, and you guys could chime in if you agree, is from a level of frustration, right? You're frustrated with something that's happening, some injustice that happened in your community, something that popped off in your school, something that popped off at work, and you just want to have a conversation and or make a change and make a difference. And I thank you for making that change at 22 years old, seeing that youth in college does go up to 25, and that does fit in the category of where we at. Akeem Browder just joined us. Hey, Akeem.
I'm.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hey, everyone.
Well, you can do a brief introduction of yourself really quickly, and then I'll ask you a question.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed what you had said.
I'll introduce you. It's fine. Akeem Browder is a social justice advocate and an agent of change. The Bronx native works to honor the legacy of his brother Khalif Browder and mother Renita Browder by working with elected officials, lawyers, doctors, college students, and community-based organizations to change laws, policies, and regulations that devastate poor communities and families that have been impacted by mass incarceration and solitary confinement in state prisons. He is the founder of Shutdown Rikers and the Khalif Browder Foundation. Akeem ran for mayor of New York City in 2007 and intends to run again in 2021 to show his commitment to narrative change, social justice, and equity for all. Akeem, we were just talking about how we've been able to get into the movement. Edwin shared a little bit about his story and the reason why he's running for New York City Council for the 40th District for 2021. But I want to ask you a specific question towards you. Stop and Frisk subsequently contributed to illegal quotas from the New York Police Department. Akeem, as a Bronx native, you continue to honor the legacy of your brother Khalif Browder, who was wrongfully arrested and convicted of a crime that he did not commit. You stated before that action is the only thing that's going to avoid having another Khalif Browder. So my question is, what are some actions that have happened so far to prevent police brutality, help you advocate for protective policy, and honor Khalif? Akeem?
So if you're, that question is really dynamic. I mean, if we want to look at what has been done to protect our communities, is from tactics like stop and frisk and any police brutality. I don't think we are there yet to say that we have that in place. We obviously see the day and times that we live in right now, where it's very hectic. It's really hectic and I'm sorry for any background noise on my end, but it's really hectic on in the streets of America, period. We have, that's why we have constant people fighting for justice on a daily basis. And when we're talking about the protests that we have going on, all the way to the court cases, all the way to even people being more radical than others. I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot of demands that we have out there right now for the government to hear, because we've been asking for things like speedy trial. I mean, this year alone, we saw at the beginning of this year that since last year we had in 2019, June 9th, we passed a really progressive bill for New York, and then by January it got taken away, which was our criminal justice budget here in New York that was passed. I don't know if you remember this, but it was taken away from us within day one of it being put into practice. We were fighting for things like we did get certain laws in New York passed actually that are progressive, like fighting to have prosecutorial misconduct put into effect. We did get some victories, but it's I can't count victories as little as the little wins that we have anymore, because we see that they put loopholes into place. I'm sorry if I'm over talking it, but I wouldn't be so. I don't think that question actually would fit what we see in 2020. Is basically what I'm saying.
So I guess I would want you to define what you see in 2020 and what we could do to help change that, because I know that you've been working in activism for a long period of time. You were influential in helping to shut down Rikers, which is a 10-year plan that we have for the city of New York.
No, we don't have that. Like, I don't want you putting that out there, because we don't have a 10-year plan to shut down Rikers. Actually, that was put out by Bill de Blasio, and then 4 months later, please let's correct this. 4 months later, after he won his election, he then announced that he would not be able to do it in his time, and he hoped that the next mayor would pick up the torch. So let's actually realize what happened. He used the fact that he said he would do something so he can get reelected, and then rescinded on that. But what got major news was the fact that he was going to shut down Rikers. What didn't get major news, but it was on the news, it just wasn't major news, was that he had to rescind that offer or that plan. But what he did do was use or create a budget for $8 billion to be spent on the new jails. So it was a very tactical plan that was very, I mean, it was you could see it happening, but you didn't. A lot of New York didn't want to see it. So no, please don't put that out there that we have a 10-year plan to shut down Rikers. We do not at this point.
No, thank you for the clarification, because I think there's miseducation out there as well, seeing that is something that is, if you Google shut down Rikers, it pops up. The mayor has this 10-year plan in place to turn it into community jails and policing, and how police reform will show up. But seeing that that's not the case, I appreciate you bringing that point up. But I think also, how can we support you in this movement? Once again, you've been in this fight for a long period of time. You just had a training this past weekend in the Bronx. But how can we be supportive? I know sometimes people feel as if young folks can be a part of the movements, but you've seen that young people have led majority, like all the movements that we have seen in the past. So how can we support you in this movement?
So one, education. We have to each one of us has to be able to teach the youth and the adults. We have to be in this movement together, and I think we are. This is the most united the world, if not just America, but the world has ever been. I think you see it all over the country and all over the world that people are saying we've been said enough is enough, and so now we're putting our money where our mouth is, or we're putting our foot down, basically. And so one thing for sure, protests are necessary. It's necessary in a way to say that we have to keep pressure on the government to let them know that these are our rights, and we are not just going to go back to business as usual. So one, I would encourage everyone get trained on not doing march styles, because we can't anymore. This is martial law that we're in right now. And so I would say that people should realize that this isn't the atmosphere that's going to be safe, because officers, as you can see, are doing what they do. They're brutalizing women, they're beating up and basically abuse. This is actually illegal what they're doing. But they're the law. Who do you call? So the elders should be teaching and training. This is what the Khalid Browder Foundation has been doing for the last five weeks. We've been training every weekend, like we're going to do this weekend here in the Bronx, on how to do a protest, how to be safe, and how to be smart during protests, because no one should be out there and risking their life, let alone their freedom, let alone their safety, or anything else that comes in a part of that. But after that, or to know while you're doing that, while people are doing the protest that has to happen every day all across the country, if not the world, what has to happen while we're doing that simultaneously, you have organizers that are letting our demands be clear to the elected officials of each state. This is what we want. We're not asking for it. We've asked before, we've cried before, we've begged before, we pleaded, we negotiated. But these are the things that we're looking for. And I know as we organize in New York, and I've been having calls with congressmen like AOC, congressmen and congresswomen, as well as like the elected officials that's running for office, like Michael Blake running for Congress. We are having conversations with them and telling them this is what we want. One, we want accountability. We want accountability that says if officers are breaking the law, just like an average person breaks the law, we want them to have equitable and equitable time in jail. If they can do something illegal, just like we would do, what gives them the right to have privilege or no accountability? So we're not allowing our foot to be negotiated with that. That's just fair and it's equitable. If it's wrong for us, it's wrong for them. Also, we want an accountability process that's not run by the police. If you notice in New York, our accountability goes to the police. They're watched over by themselves. I mean, we do have an attorney general that should be on top of it, but that obviously when we report an officer and put out reports on them or write them up, we get nothing in return. It takes a year to 2 years before we even hear anything back on that report. And usually when you hear something back, they dropped all investigations. They found it to be nothing. So we want a system that's going to be run outside of the police departments to head when we have complaints as a people over an officer. But I think also what we really should be working towards is community policing. Everyone in our communities has a knowledge of what's happening before it happens. Usually if someone in your community has a problem with someone, you hear it first in the hood. You know what's going on. And so we should be working towards a system that can not, unless the police are necessary, like they're not necessary for mental health issues, but yet they come. And so we're working on a system that the police doesn't have to be involved when it comes to someone who's mentally ill. But if they're needed, when they're needed, and when the community asks for it, we can allow them to do their job. But if they're not needed for a mother who's having a hard time with her kids, that she's not home, or maybe she needs extra help, community should be there. But we've been giving all that responsibility to the police and that authority to police when they really shouldn't have that much power. At least not in this person's view, not in my view.
Thanks, Hakeem.
Sorry if I'm long-winded with that.
No, I think you're touching on all the points that Jada, Angelique, and Edwin probably align with or do not align with, but we'll have a conversation about it as well. But I think Edwin also exemplifies a community police officer. He's embedded within the community and knows a lot of things that's going on. And before you came on the call, he actually laid out reasons why he has such a deep connection to Brooklyn. But to all of you, I think we have room for 2 more questions. We're gonna do kind of a rapid fire style, seeing that we are getting close to time. What do you think? What do you think the NAACP, as a large civil rights organization, should do better to stand in on this fight on a national level? Edwin?
As with many other federal lawsuits, they're able to bring big change. This lawsuit is virtually unknown. So we need folks to know that this lawsuit is happening and support it the way that NAACP has done for decades with the Legal Defense Fund. Granted, we're not, we're taking initiative, so we're not the defendants, but we need people to know that this lawsuit is real, it's happening, and to support it.
Thanks, Edwin. Jada, how do you feel that we could better support on a national level?
By just being visible, showing up, helping us, like I said, turn on that light to the ugly truth of our justice system here in Kentucky, until we get that justice that we deserve for Breonna.
Appreciate you. D'Angelique?
I think that as a national organization, the NAACP just continue to uplift and amplify what we as organizers and members of the organization are doing within the field, but also looking to reinvest a lot of the donations that the NAACP is getting back into local units on the ground, if at all possible. I think would be really, really, really helpful to a lot of us and what it is we're doing.
Thank you. And lastly, Hakeem.
Sorry, I was muted. Actually, I want to take a different step. I think NAACP, if not already, because I'm not fully aware of everything that you guys do, but the youth, I know when it comes to the, you guys are very old, elder-run organization. Like I know a few people in NAACP, and I think that being a hand in the upliftment of the youth that is in our communities, where you guys are in every city, in every state that you're in, giving them a hand, putting them under your wing, and giving them the reins so that they can start running, or giving them the torch so that they can start running, and doing things that you as an elder wouldn't be able to do anymore, because it's time to pass the torch. It's only right to start passing down leadership roles, and putting them in the positions to be the leaders of 2030 or 2000 and on, like 2020 and on.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I know sometimes there's misconceptions around the NAACP and whether or not we have a youth and college division, but we definitely do have a strong one. You have myself, who is a state college president, as well as Jada and DeAngelique, who serves as a chapter president as well. So we definitely are we are definitely trying to move up the ladder and ensure that we reach back, Sankofa, reach back and lift people as we climb, because these seats aren't permanent. And I think we recognize that as well. And it's time for us to pass that torch. Lastly, I know we've been speaking a lot about police accountability, police reform, all these great topics that have been coming to the surface. If there are any folks listening that aren't connected personally to the fight of ending police brutality and mass incarceration, what is one myth you want to dispel about the system? So I'll go back to Akeem, and then we'll go to Edwin afterwards.
I think that's a perfect question. One of the myths, that I've seen, I even talk to people in my community that aren't a part of it, but they watch the news or they're just hearing what's happening. There's a lot of people that's upset, that's Black folks that's upset with the movement, because they think that, there's a misconception that we're starting fires and beating up police and all this other stuff that the organizers or the people who's really for the movement at this moment, this window of opportunity that's presented to us, we're working hard on a lot of fronts, trying to put out fires while also fighting a system that has always been oppressive. And so I think we should do a lot better or a lot more work on making it clear what our demands are, so that the public gets to hear it. And I think that falls on one end, the media that isn't covering us, so we have to actually create those methods that gets our words out there better, so that we have allies and not the people who are making up their minds, trying to say, getting confused with what's happening and what's really happening. And so I think we should do a lot better in reach and getting our clear as day message. We're saying Black Lives Matter, so we have to have something to go along with it to say hey, Black Lives Matter, we shouldn't be, we should have equity in education. We should have equity in healthcare and in justice period. And this is how we want it. So that there's clear methods or clear lanes of what our demands are in every state.
Thanks for that, Akeem. Edwin?
In terms of myth, I would have to say the idea that simply because someone joined the police department that they don't get that there are issues going on. If officers felt that they would land safely, I'm telling you, more officers would speak out. Because ever since I've blown the whistle 4 years ago, it's been over 3,000 officers now who have reached out via social media or another officer. This is nationwide, and said, thank you. Thank you for speaking for me. I'm a single mother, so I can't risk losing my job, or, my wife doesn't work, so I can't risk losing my job. Thank you. So I wish we have to create a space where officers are able to blow the whistle, but be safe afterwards. If officers felt that they would land softly and safely, you'd be surprised. We'd get a lot more internal change than you think. So that's me. In terms of myth, a lot more officers get it. Remember, people are just trying to pay their bills, and it's safer to not say anything. But a lot more officers get it than people would ever imagine.
D'Angelique?
I'd like to really quickly touch on what Akeem said, because I think he started to say something that was really important, just about Black Lives Matter and what it means. I think a lot of the times, especially like, at least for me where I'm at in my area, and I'm sure you all as organizers are getting similar questions, being in an area that is extremely, extremely, extremely Republican and right wing, we get a lot of flack and pushback on saying Black Lives Matter. And I think just making sure people understand that when we say Black Lives Matter, we aren't saying that other lives don't matter. We're saying that at the basis of things, when you look at all the intersectionalities and you look at all of the different systems, for some reason, cross-culturally, like in different countries, everywhere, it seems like Black people coupled with our intersectionalities are at the base of that. So exactly what Akeem is saying, when we say Black Lives Matter, we're pushing for equity. We're saying that when a fire is on, when a house is on fire in a neighborhood, and like we call the fire department and they're coming through, that they're not stopping and spraying every house in the block, right? Like when we're walking up to them and saying, how come you're not just putting the fire out in our house? They're not going, well, there's a really, really nice house at the beginning of the block, so we're just spraying it down to make sure that one doesn't catch on fire. While in the meanwhile, at our house, at the Black Lives Matter house, we're seeing that fire spread from Black Lives Matter into people with disabilities matter, into LGBTQ plus matters, into those that identify as being low income matter, things of that nature, letting them know that if we can't say that Black Lives Matter, then our intersectionalities are eventually going to fall with that. And we're seeing now with this increased support from our white liberals, brothers and sisters, and just for those who are finally waking up and seeing like this system can also tear you down too, if you continue to stay silent and don't stand up and say that those at the bottom matter as well. So Black Lives Matter is about pushing equity. And then I think the only other thing that I would really say is important is just going back to making sure people understand that work still has to happen behind closed doors. For us, we had like I said, the biggest, most peaceful protest in our area. And it was like immediately after that, everybody got mad at us and saying, well, where's the next protest? Where's the next protest? Where's the next protest? And it's like, yo, like, it's because of the work we're doing behind closed door that we were able to secure $30 million in COVID relief funding for the Southwest, when the city council wasn't even going to tell anybody in the city about the original $90 million that they had in COVID relief. They were just going to keep that in closed doors. So it's like, we were able to bring that. We were able to get advanced peace passed in our area, and that's $100 million, all about reallocating funds from the police department back into our parks, and providing services for the people that are actually affected by police brutality. So it's like understanding that even if you're not seeing us in the forefront and out in the streets, that we're still doing stuff. And if you have questions or you want to get involved and you have an issue with the way we're doing it, that we are a member-based organization, that most of us are member-based. So please join us. If you don't like the way something is happening, contribute your ideas and let's come together and continue to build this movement. So I would say those are the two myths that I would appreciate if everybody out here could go and start talking about.
I think you touched on a really good point though. Like people feel like protests are the end all be all most times, and they don't know about the background work that's being done to help propel some of these policies and legislations to be changed. Like we just passed our police accountability bill in the state of Connecticut with qualified immunity 2 days ago. Actually, it went through the desk of the Senate, and now it's going to our governor's office, and it's going to be on his desk to sign. So we are excited about that, and we'll definitely have more. Thank you. We'll have more conversations around what that looks like. But Jada, final questions. That final answer.
Yes.
Question?
I got it. So I actually want to touch on something that Akeem pointed out, which is accurate reporting of the media. I've had so many youth come to me to say that this is what the media is reporting, this is what they're seeing on Facebook, and that's why they're scared to come out and serve on the front lines. You're seeing protesters with trumped up charges, you're seeing protesters getting hurt on the front lines daily, and that's all the media is showing, but they're not showing the good sides of what's happening at the protests or the effective change that is happening as well. So if we could go in and actually start reporting our own media, that would be something that could shift that change for the youth as well, because I know I have a lot of people that are scared to even come out because they think that something might potentially happen to them. So definitely touching base on that. That is like a myth that sometimes protests are peaceful, and we need to promote that more often.
So, I think
Can I?
Oh, go ahead, Akeem. Last thought.
I'm sorry. I really like everything that everyone was saying, and I just wanted to piggyback on something that I realized, and I hope that I get this across really quick and or really adequate enough. So, look, we, as you said, there's as someone said on here. I'm sorry, the last person that was just speaking. I'm sorry, I don't know everybody's names on here yet, but the last person I was speaking touched on, like, there's things that's happening in the background. And so that's where the confusion with a lot of people who don't know what's going on. Now, if it's an elected official doing something, you hear of it, you hear of how they're doing it. And that's because they got the media, or any big organization that does news or broadcasting is going to cover their stories. And so that obviously means we have to have well-intentioned, accurate and pinpointed messaging to go across. And so just like there's the George Floyd on Facebook, on social media for protesters, we have to have something like that where everyone knows that's where you're getting your information about marches or protests or whatever. We need something like that so that we can have our own media source, so that we can put out, because people are seeing us march, but they're saying, well, what is marching going to do? We need blah, blah, blah. Or how come y'all marching and you're breaking up stuff and breaking up stores? And I hear this like literally as of yesterday, Black people, older Black generations actually, in my community, in the hood, in the projects next to me, the older Black men that I was speaking to yesterday, they're confused. They're saying, no, y'all marching, but y'all not getting nothing done. That's not how it's done, blah, blah, blah. That's because they're not seeing or hearing the actual things that's happening in the background. And so if we can start reaching and making allies with all walks of life, some people are saying, like someone said on here, that the marches are predominantly young folks. And yet that means we're not involving everyone all at once. Let's get the elders together. Let's get the media and my generation, your generation, and get them all together and stop separating, because divide and conquer is what this government has been good at, great at, excellent at. Divide and conquer. And that, I think they're getting their way by allowing us to be divided. Like, the youth are here, the elders are there. They don't understand this. And the elders is like, you don't understand this. And you're just making it worse. And we have to stop dividing so that we can't be conquered.
And I think that definitely, sorry not to just hop in here.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap this up soon.
I'm gonna be really quick. I'm gonna be really quick. I think that the perspective you're bringing is definitely important, but I also feel like it's definitely situational. Because I know for me in my area, we do have a lot of intergenerational building going on. Like, I'm going to my elders, like literally our mother of our Black community, like our eldest Black woman here. I'm sitting on the floor and I'm having conversations with her about what it is I need to be doing and what it is she did back in like her days when she was in my position. So it's like, I think it's really just about opening up the floor for conversation. So I do want to say I think it's situational, but definitely us as young people, we do need to be making sure we are reaching out to our elders and making sure that they know, even though that this is absolutely 110%, arguably 200% a youth-led movement, we can't do it without our elders. So I think that's definitely important. And I just want to say one last myth that I would really just like to point out to people just about organizing all of this is there has been like Camden, New Jersey has made it to the forefront. They've been on the news when talking about defunding the police department because they said that they have defunded their police department. And I really just quickly want to dispel that myth. They didn't defund their police department. All they did was put their police officers with the county and said that this is now going to be on the county. So please, if you're a young organizer in your area, please do not ask for your city to emulate or to do what Camden, New Jersey is doing, because that's not fixing the problem. That's just giving it to somebody else. So that was my last just little thing.
No, I love and appreciate all you guys. And I thank you guys for taking out the time out of your day on this Friday afternoon to have this conversation. I think DeAngelique, you also brought up a really good point. A lot of times I see young activists and protesters on Facebook, on Instagram, just reposting, not reading anything. So make sure you guys read the information that you see, because some of the information that is being shared through the media is incorrect. And even in the midst of the times of what protesting looks like, what the after is. So making sure that you have the clear definition and understanding of what the demands are that the protesters are going about doing to make collective change, because you don't want to go into a movement blind. So once again, I appreciate you guys for coming and having this wonderful conversation, but also I hope that you were able to leave with some tangible action steps and be able to go home and, like Taylor said, take control of the narrative. See you guys later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.